let me start with that question. What do Americans really need to know is the basics about what's going on uh, between Britain and the EU and within the EU by the EU in defence and security?
Basically, what Americans need to understand is just what are the ambitions of the European Union. When you understand where the European Union wants to position itself, then you can start asking questions about, okay, if it's in that position, what sort of checks and balances do we have over the powers that we give them? NATO, which has been the cornerstone of defence between America, Britain, and the rest of Europe, has kept the peace. We effectively won the Cold War, and then we threw away the advantage of the Cold War when we over-egged it on the peace dividend. And so we've hollowed out our armed forces. And today, we're turning round to some of the other big players who didn't follow that line, and we're saying to the Russians, to the Chinese, to the Iranians, or who have all built up their forces, is you are our enemy. We will be at war with you in the next 5 years, but can you hold fire for a while we get ourselves sorted out? It's absolutely crass madness to, say to the school bully, I'm going to come after you when I'm grown up. He's going to bully you now, and that's the problem. And the European Union have taken some of Donald Trump's negotiating positions. Donald Trump, like every American president right back to Eisenhower, has said to the Europeans, you ought to pay your fair share for defense. And you haven't been. You have been riding on the back of Uncle Sam, and we've now, certainly with Donald Trump, we're going to put America first. And of course, the European Union, who have the ambition to take control of all European defence and foreign policy and to subvert their nation states and become a super federal single state, jumped on the bandwagon and are saying, okay, we'll be the tax collector for the 5% of gross domestic product. And for that, we are going to take control of European defence. And as I've often written on my UK Defence Matters, is they are like the cuckoo in the nest. And gradually, the European unions will oust Uncle Sam out of the NATO nest. And then what we will have is we'll have European Union policies, not NATO policies. I mean, the great success of NATO is that although America is the big grandfather of it all, they have honoured the nation state, each individual nation state. So when we had problems with the Argentinians, fine, we got on, and America tried to help as much as it could. It had its interest, but it didn't stand in the way, as previously America did stand in the way when we had problems with the Egyptians over the Suez Canal back in the 50s. But by and large, NATO has worked because America has honoured the nation state. The European Union, by contrast, wants to subvert the nation state, and they call it competencies, and they want to take the defence and foreign policy competence from their nation states. And where Britain is at the moment is our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, a couple of weeks ago, signed up to a new defence deal. But no one's talking about the terms, and the terms are under what's called a third state. And that means that a third state has to recognise the values of the European Union. And
So let's
17.4
just,
million.
David, sorry, let's just
Sorry,
pause on
can I-
that important. That's a very important point, which
Yep.
which certainly most Americans don't get, and in fact, as you imply, most Britons don't get either. So it's sort of like the EU and NATO are competing to be the leading institution for defence and security in Europe, and then Britain is playing an ambiguous game. Although I think, if I speak for myself, I think Keir Starmer has already signalled that he's very much in favour of the European Union deeper institutionalisation at the expense of NATO. But I think that's a great point to pause on. And I have a sort of question that follows from that, and also some of the things you said earlier, because I can imagine this is a question from Americans, so my American side. I can imagine Americans saying to you, well, hang on a minute, why are you raising alarm about the European Union? Because I thought Trump had just won the battle for NATO by getting European members to commit to 5% of GDP. So he's won that battle. He has reinvigorated NATO by getting members to invest more in it. So if NATO is reinvigorated, why are you saying that we should worry about the European Union's competition with NATO?
Well, it's really I wrote about the binary choice for a future NATO. Is it led by the United States or is it led by the European Union? Now, historically, since NATO was formed, the United States, as I said earlier, has given has accepted the sovereignty of each of the nation states that are members. The European Union wants to be a single federal state, and it has a democratic deficit because, unlike America, all Americans went to the polls to vote for your president. Your president then, regardless of which one comes in, once he's got that, he has the right to appoint various people, and that they are subject to quite a lot of scrutiny by congressional hearings. And I watch them with great interest. And some of the people that were put up for some of the judges' positions were totally unsuitable for it, but they were political appointees. And I think that was the Republicans exposed them and said that they weren't suitable to be federal judges. Now, we haven't got that in the European Union. We have got unelected apparatchiks that we do not vote for, we cannot get rid of. And when you consolidate power in such a big, powerful institution, you've got to put in place the right checks and balances over the way that they exercise the power that we give them. Because if you can't exercise the power over them, whether they're communist, fascist, or whatever, then they start to dominate the people. They control the people. The people don't control them. With your presidents, I think, are allowed two terms and then they're out, but they have to, at midterm, have to go for another election. The American people, if they don't like what their president is doing, can get rid of them. But we can't get rid of the president of the European Union. And the European Union started off as a trade organization, and everybody thinks, yeah, trade is a good thing. But they've taken more and more power and control. In the 2016 referendum, 17.4 million Brits said, no, we wanted to take back control of our own sovereignty. And we have not done it because civil servants, a lot of the chattering political classes have undermined the view of the British people to take back control. And we're being locked back in under the defence things, under third state rules set by the European Union. I've just got a letter from the government to do with a petition that's going around saying that we still have sovereignty and control over our own forces. Depending on what the European initiative is. It doesn't turn around and saying, what will the European Union do when there is a Brit initiative that we want support? It's all one way. And
Yeah.
uh, so uh, you need to understand how the European Union works, its democratic deficit. And heaven forbid that you have a warmongering leader of the European Union who takes us to war that nobody wants. Um,
Right. So let's unpack institutional initiatives that you're talking about there. So I quite agree. Or, or Britons are in, although Britons are in the habit of complaining about US leadership, at least the United States of America is much more democratic and accountable than the European Union. But let's unpack the initiatives you're talking about. So I think there's uh, two parts of this we need to unpack. First of all, what is the European Union doing to further integrate defense and security at the federal level? And then what is Britain doing under Keir Starmer to sign into that?
Well, if you look at the European Defence Fund is one thing, and the UK defence industry sees pound notes at the end of the tunnel and is signing up to European Union-led um, research and development of the next generation of weapons. Now, the European Union does not have an army. It does not have an air force. It does not have a navy. It hasn't got submarines, and it certainly hasn't got nuclear weapons. And that's what they want from Britain. And so our defense industry, which has come up with some fantastic weapons that give our military people an edge when they do go to battle, they're signing up to European-led research projects, but the intellectual property right that comes out at the end of it will be owned and controlled by the European Union. So if you're looking at submarines, we've got a very capable submarine engineering and production capacity up in the north of England, producing first-rate submarines. They'll go and come up with the next generation in collaboration with the European Union. We will have to pay money into the defence fund, which the European Union will very kindly return to us. But at the end of the day, the new weapon that comes out will be owned by the European Union, and then they'll turn around to Britain and tell us how we can use that weapon. I mean, you've seen it in Ukraine, is that there's been quite a lot of arguments about how different weapons may be used, because one country will say, fine, you can let them have this one, but they can't use it. They've got to target it in a particular way. And so the new generation of weapons will be controlled by the European Union. The European Union is also setting up quite an extensive network of command and control centres, not soldiers, but they will make the political decision because they want to control foreign policy. And once they're controlling foreign policy, heaven knows. And when you look at the history of the European Union, the way it's treated Britain since we've come out on Brexit, they've basically divided Northern Ireland from Britain. They have trying to take back our fishing rights. When you look at the way they dealt with the Swiss, who are independent, they used all the powers that they had to try to coerce the Swiss to fall in line with them on uh, on monetary matters. The Greek foreign minister, he in his book, he wrote about trying to get the Greek economy sorted out because they were in hock to the European Union, and the European Union was dictating policy to the Greek government, and he went to the Chinese to get a loan. Well, I think, but the Chinese only gave him, I think, 2/3 of what he asked for. And then he found out that the Chinese had a call from the European Union leadership to say, no, don't give, I think it was 3 billion euros. Don't give them 3 billion, give them 2 billion, because they'll still be in hock to us. If you give them 3 million, we will not be able to control Greece. And that was I can't remember the name of the Greek finance minister, who's quite a famous economist. But these are the sort of things that are happening, And if you haven't got that check and balance over the exercise of power that we the people give, but we should not be going into um, a pact with people that we can't control.
Right. I get it. So what do you think Starmer hopes to achieve by signing Britain in to these initiatives?
Well, in my view, he is rejoining Britain as a third state of the European Union. We've never really left. We're not taking advantage of WTO trade rules. We're still tied in to the European rules because we've incorporated them into our um, procurement rules. So we have to offer all our military contracts under European rules. We can't go under WTO rules, which would allow us to say this is military. We're not going to go out for competition. We will support our own industry, which is very much what the Canadians did when they were trying to reboot their shipbuilding industry, which I believe they've done quite successfully. So the Canadian shipbuilding industry, building ships for their navy, their coast guard, and I think they've got quite a big coast guard arrangement. And a friend son of mine who was a marine architect, he's decamped to Canada because that's where there's work and there's where there's projects. They're not happening here in Britain. So your question was about where Starmer was taking us. He's taking us back into the European Union against the wishes of 17.4 million people, uh, uh, and under worse terms. And we will get punished by the European Union for having the temerity to say we want to leave. We don't like your democratic deficit. Because David Cameron, before we had our referendum, went to the European Union and said, let's get you sorted out. Let's address this democratic deficit. And they wouldn't do it. They recognise they've got a democratic deficit, but they don't put their house in order. They've never had their accounts audited for 25 years. I mean, it's an organisation, an institution that's out of control. And when we give it control over our lives, we have no redress on how they exercise the powers that they are going to take from us. So,
Right. And I think our audience, but particularly Americans, should be reminded how ridiculous some of the arguments were in 2016 and continue to be about European defense and security. So I remember David Cameron when he was renegotiating Britain's membership of the European Union during the campaign for Brexit. So he had that ridiculous visit to Brussels where he was going to say he was going to enhance Britain's status in the European Union. He came back with nothing. And then his administration's line was that if Britain does not stay in the European Union, there's going to be European war all over again. Britain won't be able to defend itself. There'll be more terrorism because somehow Northern Irish terrorists will take advantage of Britain's exit from the European Union to restart terrorism, which had ended with the Good Friday Agreement. The arguments were absolutely ridiculous. And I think it pays to remind ourselves of that because we continue to get these ridiculous arguments from Euro EU files like Keir Starmer that Britain can't do anything. Britain will be insecure and indefensible unless we sign back in. And, its economy will be insecure, and then we can't afford things unless we also sign into these new his economic reset, which is a separate agreement to his. Well, it's bundled with some of the defense commitments that he's making. It's all a bit vague because these are more like letters of intent than real agreements. So I think we can say I think you and I can agree that the European Union can't be trusted on defence and security, and I think we can agree that Keir Starmer can't be trusted when he says he's doing these things out of British self-interest. It seems to me, speaking for myself, that Keir Starmer's initiatives are more ideological. He's he thinks that the European Union project is is right for all countries. It's super nationalism is better than national sovereignty, and he's not signing these agreements in Britain's self-interest. So
Well,
let's yes, go ahead, David.
Keir Starmer was famously interviewed before he was elected as our Prime Minister at Davos with the World Economic Forum. And he was asked, what did he think of Davos and the World Economic Forum? And his response was, I can do business with these people much better than I can in Westminster. Now, he is our Prime Minister. He should be defending our democracy. He should be defending the interests of Great Britain. Your President Trump got elected basically because he convinced the American people that he wanted to make America great again. He wanted to take back control. And he was basically fighting the globalists, and the globalists are fighting back. Uh, and JD Vance's speech to the European Union summed it up. Beware the enemy within. And we should be very wary of coming up with and accepting an institution that has got such a democratic deficit. The founding fathers of America, I mean, they got it so right in the different basis of the constitution that America has, that there are checks and balances. The American people can get rid of their president every 4 years. We can't get rid of the European Union one. Um, uh, uh, Britain said, come out, we want out. But equally as well, there have been other referendums in Europe on different issues. The Maastricht Treaty was one where the French voted against it, the Dutch have voted against it. I think the Irish voted 3 times against it until they got it right, according to the European Union. So if you don't vote the right way, you have a vote again. And then if you've voted the wrong way, well, that's only advisory. We're not going to take any notice of it. And so to give power to one union, and you talk about trusting the European Union, that is a matter of trust. You can have trust if you have a means of controlling them not controlling you. The other reality is that the issue of the binary choice of who leads European Union, sorry, who leads European defence. Is it America or is it the European Union? Now, America brings to the defence table immense power in terms of its soldiers, its sailors, and its airmen. They have got the weapons. The European Union hasn't. And so if the European Union cuckoo does force America to think only of America and start looking more to the West, to the Pacific, and to the issues that you have with China and Taiwan and in that direction, and of course we've got AUKUS with Australia, New Zealand, and America, Japan, looking at the issues in the Pacific. That what we must realize is that America has troops, the European Union hasn't. So if you hollow out America with its troops, all you've got is a few Belgians, a few English, a few Scots, a few Italians, but we've already got them in NATO. So if you take America out of NATO, and their commitment out of NATO, which was the threat that was implied by Donald Trump to try to lever more money for defence. That has been used by the European Union to say, you can't trust the Americans, but you can trust us, and we will raise this money. But if Europe does spend 5% of gross national product on defense and America isn't committed to Europe, then a NATO led by the European Union will be much, much weaker. And it will certainly appeal to the Russians and the Chinese. And our policies at the moment are pushing the Russians and the Chinese together. I mean, if you go back to the Second World War, the defeat of the Germans by the Russians was only brought about because Japan had invaded China, and the Chinese and the Russians, who were facing each other in across Manchuria, came to an agreement that they wouldn't fight each other. So I think it was Stalin pulled out all his Manchurian troops back to Moscow in their white camouflage kit, and that swung the balance. And so the Russians started to succeed in their fights because that they had been reinforced by all the troops that they had guarding their Chinese border. Uh,
Yeah. So David, so you're already talking, you're already advising Americans on what they can do to handle the European Union in a more Western interested way. So we've got 5 minutes remaining. So why don't you give the United States government some advice on how to handle the European Union, an institution which I don't think most officials, let alone most Americans, really understand.
Uh, my advice is every American should listen to JD Vance's talk to the European Union and realize what he's saying. He's saying, beware the enemy within. Go for free speech, support your democracy, don't undermine your democracy, because democracy is what people fight for. I mean, we've still got massive immigration in this country, which is changing the nature and culture of the country. Um, and the new generation Z, and I've written about that on UK Defence Matters, they're saying, oh, we wouldn't fight for this country, we don't believe in it. I mean, the democracy that we've got in Britain came after two horrific world wars. In the First World War, because it was warfare on an industrial stage, they needed to have conscription and they needed to convince the ordinary working Brit to go and fight. And you're going to fight for a land fit for heroes. But when they came back from the First World War, they didn't really honour that promise of a land fit for heroes, especially after the Great Depression. And then the Second World War came about, and the same call went out. But this time, when the Second World War finished, we said we will have a land fit for heroes. We had the NHS, we had a lot more equal opportunities. The class system that we had in Britain has changed. And what we have in Britain now isn't the old class system where it was Tories for the toffs, the Liberals for the professionals, and the Labour Party for the working class. Now we have, as you have in America, there's two classes. There's the tax makers and the tax takers. And the tax takers are led by the government and local government officials who sit in cabinets, taking money, spending money as they want from the tax makers. And the tax makers come from across all the previous in Britain, all the different class divides. And the working class want to make something of their life. They want self-reliance, not state reliance. They want self-help, not state help, because that is the best way to deliver a vibrant economy. And that's what we've got to do. The European Union is marching in exactly the opposite direction, which is why 17.4 million people understood why we wanted to have our nation state, why we wanted to take back control from a federalizing bureaucracy, apparatchiks that are running our lives, so that we can make our own way in life. And if we work hard, apply ourselves, we will do better, and then society is better for it. But if you look at any of the communist regimes or fascist regimes, in the end, they actually turned on their own people and they used Stasi tactics to control the people. And when you look at some of the measures that are coming in on the control of free speech, Conservative Woman is a great avenue, but they have to step very, very carefully that they don't get arrested by the thought police.
Yeah, so David, we got a minute 30 seconds left. So now we're talking about what America might do to help Britain escape its trajectory. Now, there has been some talk in America that the Trump administration might pressure Britain through tariffs or through negotiations for a free trade agreement um, in respect to suppression of free speech. In other words, that the administration might say, you're not going to get what you want economically and maybe not with arms exports unless you curb these progressive statutes that are suppressing free speech and particularly political dissent. So it's this week that the online safety bill became effective, and it is already being used to suppress discussion of the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, and to show video of protesters against government policies such as illegal immigration. So there has been that discussion. Would you advise the Trump administration to go that direction? What else would you advise?
There could be some unintended consequences for that, um, because effectively, if America did that, then it would be a clear case of one sovereign country, America, trying to influence the policy of another sovereign country, and it would be used by the pro-Europeans to push Britain back into the European Union. It would undermine what I call the binary choice of who leads NATO in the future. Is it European Union led, or America led? Then, if America gets too heavy-handed, then I think the unintended consequence is that it would be used by the European Union to take power, and if you like, as a cuckoo in the nest, to oust the US from deeper involvement in NATO. And then the new NATO, or ETA, if it's called the European Treaty Organization, would be much weaker. And then militarily against Russia, uh, uh, it would be absolutely fall into their hands. But Germany is suffering because of the sanctions. Its industry is failing at the moment because it isn't getting cheap energy. It was getting cheap gas and oil from the Russians, and the Russians have sold it on to the Chinese and the Indians. And I mean, the rise of BRICS is that there's a new game in town. It isn't all the petrodollar anymore.